Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be starting in a bit. Small announcement. CA 7581, please move your vehicle for somebody else. Thank you. Sorry, it's CA 8571.
Everybody, I'm Shanti. Looks like you have a full house today. It gives me great pleasure to introduce today's oration, which commemorates Professor Senake Bandaranayake and his contribution of knowledge and inspiration in the field of Sri Lanka's archaeology, architecture and design. Our lecturer today, Dr. Shanti Jayewardene, was both a student and a friend of Professor Senake Bandaranayake and Mrs. Fonseca. So she is well suited to speak of his many accomplishments. Shanti Jayewardene is an architect, architectural historian, and independent researcher. She lives in Sri Lanka, but trained at the University of Moratuwa, University College London, and the University of Oxford. She holds a diploma in architecture and MSc in History of Modern Architecture from University College London, and a DPhil in Modern History from the University of Oxford. She has taught history and design in the UK and Sri Lanka, and her special research interest is on the intersection of Imperial and South Asian architectural historiography. Published works include several articles in 3 books: Imperial Conversations, Indo-Britain and the Architecture of South India, published in New Delhi 2007, Jeffrey Manning Bawa, Decolonizing Architecture, published by the National Trust, and most recently, she co-authored Gardens of Sri Lanka on the ancient gardens of Sri Lanka, initiated by the late Professor Senake Bandaranayake, and the book came together with Swiss landscaper Klaus Holzhausen and was published in 2025 in Milan by Silvana Editoriale, and this book I think Shanti will highlight in the lecture today. Last October, the National Trust held an event on the 20th anniversary of its founding. On that occasion, we remembered Dr. Roland Silva, and today we appreciate the contribution of Professor Senake Bandaranayake. They were friends and unique individuals who could walk with the leaders of the land, comfortable with the world outside, and yet able to relate to the lowest workers on their sites. Together, they built a number of institutions indispensable in conserving Sri Lanka's heritage assets, both tangible and intangible, from the Central Cultural Fund to the Postgraduate Institute of Archaeological Research to ICOMOS and our National Trust Sri Lanka. Their knowledge of this land was enormous, and yet they carried this wealth of knowledge lightly in unassuming ways. I remember the support Lakshman Nadraj and I received on our first venture into publishing, a coffee table publication on Gardens of Lanka released in 2009, and the hours spent with Senake in the PGIAR library, advising us and encouraging our fledgling project. Dr. Roland was the main speaker at the launch of our book. I first met Senake Bandaranayake in the early 2000s when the government of Sri Lanka had nominated him as a candidate for the post of UNESCO Director General. Then posted in Stockholm, I remember walking him through innumerable meetings and presentations in the Nordic countries. He was such a lucid speaker, often speaking without any notes and impressing everyone in the international audience with his grasp of very complex issues. Later on, Foreign Minister Lakshman Kadirgama asked me to return early from Stockholm to set up the Sri Lanka Institute of International Relations, SLIR, now known as the Kadirgama Institute. And one of the first projects was at Senake's request to do a reprint of the Sri Lanka and the Silk Route of the Sea book, which he had put together hastily to mark the arrival of the UNESCO Maritime Silk Route expedition in 1990. Painstakingly corrected by Senake and with a new foreword from the then current minister, we managed to persuade Christopher Dias at Printpack to print the revised edition in 2003, which sold out in a matter of months and is now found only in selected libraries. It is, however, the single most authoritative book on Sri Lanka and the Silk Road of the Sea, with a galaxy of eminent Sri Lankan contributors and the editorial team including Roland Silva, Leslie Gunawardene, Lorna Devaraja, KDG, Vimalaratna, and of course Senake. And they have so many rare maps, sketches, and photographs in this book. So with these last 2 anecdotes, I give the floor now to you, Shanti, and look forward to your presentation on the topic, Gardens of Sri Lanka and Influences on Contemporary Design. Thank you very much for being here today.
You want me to go? You come up and then you back. You back.
Thank you. Harita? Good evening, everyone. We've tested all the technology, and for the moment, we're all right. If you're not happy, just let one of the people outside know, and they will correct it for you because we had some problems. Good evening and welcome. And I'm honored and delighted to be here, and I thank the trustees of the National Trust for inviting me to speak tonight. I need to thank Sarla in particular for her kind introduction. And tonight I will speak about my friend and teacher, Professor Senake Bandaranayake, work on gardens and unique insights. I'm sorry, I haven't got used to their computer, so I will speak about his work on gardens and the unique insights into the lost roofs of Sri Lanka. He was a founder member of the trust and took a lead role in its activities and also in its growth. And I would also like to remember at this point Manel and Klaus, who are both missing. I will miss them. And Michael Jacob, who edited this book, but he's in Switzerland, I think, and we haven't met him yet. So Senake Bandaranayake was an eminent intellectual and archaeologist born in 1938. He was a part of that remarkable generation of post-independent intellectuals such as Martin Wickramasinghe, Chitrasena or George Keat. Senake was also an architecture historian, a poet, a modern art author, a social critic, institution builder and ambassador and administrator in the country. To begin with, we put this picture of the Parakrambahu Samudra to remind ourselves that water supported the culture of gardens in the island. Here, water management is both a source and a product of an advanced technology of irrigation, and water gardens are a medium of expression for the elaborate aesthetics of Sri Lanka's garden art. The garden book referred to in the title was published last year in Milan, and I will speak about it in more detail later. The book was of course conceived by Senake, and it unfolds his vision and deep understanding of a subject that ranges across the grand scale and complexity of a garden such as Sigiriya to the intimate and forested meditation monasteries. Senake's postgraduate work was directly concerned with architecture. Was directly concerned with architecture, and he was studying the monasteries of Anuradhapura. The title of his B.Lit dissertation was The Vaulted Brick Temples of Polonnaruwa, and I don't know if it was published, I haven't seen it. And that came out in 1972, and this is his second book, and this was what he was working on when we refer to that subject of the monasteries of Anuradhapura. And his contribution to the intellectual landscape of archaeology and arts is very well known. but his contribution to architecture is perhaps relatively less well known. And so tonight I hope I can unravel that omission. In 1972, John Irwin, keeper of the Indian section of the V&A in London, read a paper at the Royal Society of Arts. And there he argued that the very thought of a common cultural roots in a larger Asia was quite absurd. The colonial concept of diffusion and influence consistently located the principal dynamics of the historical development of a society outside that society. So here we can see that Senake presented this hypothesis on the unity and differentiation of cultures in monsoon Asia. What Senake did was he theorized a common geography and a history for monsoon Asia, and he challenged the inherited history theories of diffusion and influence invented by colonial intellectuals. So it's a very important thing was happening here, in that because Senake disagreed with those theories, he proposed a more nuanced hypothesis of unity and differentiation to explore the art and culture of monsoon Asia. As we know, even Ananda Kumaraswamy could not break away from the diffusion theory that Sri Lankan art mostly came from India. So there's the title, Sri Lanka and Monsoon Asia, Patterns of Local and Regional Architectural Development, and the problem of the traditional Sri Lankan roof. So that's what I'm hoping to focus on at this point. And this was the title of a paper Senake read at Cambridge in 1973. So now we know the title is Sri Lanka and Monsoon Asia, Patterns of Local and Regional Development and Architectural Development, and the Problem of the Sri Lankan Roof. So that's the title of the paper that he was looking at. And what I want to point out to you is this no, it's not that one, sorry. I want to point out to you is this was the problem that he was referring to, that wherever you went in Anuradhapura to study, none of the buildings had roofs. And maybe you still see a lot of them like this. And at least today we have some more great consensus on what this roof was like. But at the time, the problem was this: the buildings were roofless and no one knew what they looked like. Senake asked what was the shape and nature of the roofs, which must once have been the most dominant aspect of these ancient buildings. So the buildings he was looking at, there were more than over 500 monastic sites in Sri Lanka, and he was looking at the brick structures in those sites, where most of them had no roofs, and they were monastic sites. So the nature of the superstructure had been discussed in local archaeological circles at least since 1899. So from the time the British set up the Department of Archaeology, this subject had come up. But so far no consensus was achieved as to the roof shape or the materials of the roof. So I'll just remind you that people like Smither, Burroughs, Parnavitana, Hokart, Ayrton, Devendra and Prematilaka spoke about this problem right through till 1964. Now what Senake did was, when he approached the problem, he did something slightly different. I'm sorry, I'm still getting used to all the things left for me to move this. Okay, what he did was, he proposed two types of roofs for this region. The two main roof types differentiated in their technical composition and function. And the first was a wholly masonry building type with roofs that were pseudo towers. So that's what you're looking at here. And we have 3 of them in Sri Lanka. So these are very different to the ones I showed you before with all the columns. And they have these what Senake called pseudo towers, that they were there for monumental purposes and not for architectural ones. And they can be seen in Cambodia, Laos, India, Indonesia, and marginally in Sri Lanka. So now we're looking at roof type 2, and as you can see from these roofs, it was the dominant tradition in some monsoon Asian cultures, and it's found in China, Japan, Korea, Sri Lanka, and the west coast of India, Nepal, Kashmir, and Southeast Asia. The thing about this is this masonry base and a timber and tile roof, and here you have the tile roof on its own, but both have these soaring roofs, which is what is present in these buildings in the places I mentioned. But the materials were more perishable in these buildings than they were in the type of ruins you saw earlier, and therefore today type 2 lacks a superstructure, whereas these, from these dates, you can see they're older, but they're holding their superstructure. As far as I know, scholars had not reached a consensus as to the nature of roof type 2 until around 1980, when the new parliament buildings materialized. So I'm talking about the parliament buildings at Kotte here. So here what we have is a different scene, imagining the lost roofs of Anuradhapura. So far, Senake says archaeologists and architects had largely ignored the close parallel between the buildings in Kerala and Sri Lanka. So what I'm pointing out, this is from Seneca's book. He illustrated this, and these two, as you can see, you know what they are, but this is a Kerala roof that I'm speaking about. So there were no 3D constructions in Seneca's book, but his argument was that he gave 5 pages in that book of roofed buildings and 12 pages of roofless buildings in Anuradhapura and the region, and this knowledge would somehow reveal the nature of the lost roofs, including that of the Watadage. So the latest we had was this one by, oops, did I push something back? Yeah. Sorry. Okay. So this is a dome roof, which Padnavithan proposed, and he didn't really discuss the details of these materials. And here you have a conical, much more rectilinear roof, and this is conical, but these are with flat tiles. And this, I presume, is a recent, more recent reconstruction from the Polonnaruwa Museum, and this was in 1946. So this was even pre-independence. So now we have a question of imagining the lost roofs of Anuradhapura. And for that, so in Seneca's book, these are the pictures with the roofs. Oops. Okay. That's a picture with roofs. And these are the sketches he produced. And this is a very recent reconstruction of the Loha Mahapaya by this gentleman who's mentioned there. So you can see that he is drawing from the same tradition that Seneca argued would have been the dominant tradition in our region. Now I'd like to talk about moving from ideas to matter. In 1979, the government commissioned Geoffrey Bawa to design a new parliament in Kotte. And when Bawa was interviewed after this building was built, he said Kota is a sort of design continuum reflecting the visual formalities of all Sinhalese buildings, grand but not pompous, like what you see in Senake Bandaranayaka's book. And the book Baba was referring to was the one we saw earlier with the Ruanvali Saya stoop on the cover. And these buildings, really it will be a set of pavilions with asymmetry of planning. And this, Jeffrey Baba said in 1980. So it's the only book reference Baba ever made as to any sources he might use. He spoke otherwise in a very general way about this problem of the roofs. So I'd like to go to the idea of thinking about these roofs, which Baba did, as far as we know, for the first time. And there we go. Now here, there are 2 pages, 2 of these, two of these sites, which are from Senake Bandaranayaka's book, and which he probably took from the archaeology department drawings. And this is the parliament after it's finished, an aerial view showing these 5 or possibly 6 buildings surrounding the central building, which is here, which is a typical quincunx plan in Anuradhapura. And these are called in Sinhala the Panchayatana Parivana. And these are in Anuradhapura from about 600, 800 CE onwards. And these are the plans of, this is Western Monastery C, this is west of Abhayagiri, and these are walled compounds with 2 pavilions here. And this pavilion is surrounded by a rock pool and is built on a rock directly. And what I'm asking you to look at is to move these plans into this sketch which Baba did of the parliament. And here you have the long avenue, you have the long avenues. And here, this is a dwelling unit, and these Panchayata Parivanas are found in all of the metropolitan monasteries in Anuradhapura. You have maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 of these forming a college, and several big monasteries around having these similar situations. And these residential dwellings were supplied separately with baths and kitchens and libraries and so on. So this is Anuradhapura, and this is a possible link from Seneka's book, because Baba has already referred to the fact that Seneka's book was a source of inspiration for him. So here I'm showing you 2 reconstructions of, this is the quincunx from Anuradhapura, and this is a detail of what one of these buildings might look like. And here you have a parliament today, and that was the planning that you saw in the previous slide, and here we are going up into 3D, and you're getting some idea what these buildings would have looked like, and here what Baba actually did. Here you're looking at a summer palace in Sigiriya, and it should take you back to the fact that the parliament building sits on water at some level. And that's because Sri Lankan royalty had a predilection for building pavilions surrounded by water. And this is a summer palace. And in Abhayagiri, part of its water gardens has a similar, or it has what is called a Diguvil, a very long pool, which you'll see in a minute at Ranmasuyana, but the Abhayagiri one is not excavated. So here we have the finished version of that earlier one, and I call this Echoes of Anuradhapura because you can see, if you go backwards, Anuradhapura on your left, and as conjectural reconstructions, and then you go to the summer palace, and then you have these pavilions floating on water, and this is where those Seneka's ideas are moving in to make matter, as it were. So now I'd like to move on to the garden book. Actually, I was asked to talk about the garden book, but I wanted to show a connection here. So this is the book. It's not sold here. You need to order it. And 3 people were involved in writing this. It took 20 years to write because Senake was ill. And then this is Klaus Holzhausen, who is a Swiss landscape designer who joined the team. And I'd just like to say, the book proper spans, Okay. The book proper spans the genesis and fruition of Senake's vision of the magical gardens of Sri Lanka. And something convinced him that there was a story to be told about these gardens. And so he would express his views that he thought there was something beautiful about the gardens, and it would be a wonderful book. And hopefully it will inspire others to enjoy and explore the complexities and depth of ideas embedded in the Sri Lankan gardens. So that's the content of the book. You can see the chapters. And I'd like to move to colonial historiography before we get into the meat of this talk. So, the global historiography of gardens has largely been confined to the finest European and American or Chinese and Japanese examples. And garden archaeology in Sri Lanka began late in the 1940s, and it is Eurocentric and continues to conceal pre-colonial gardens and design cultures in the region. So that's a quick note about the structure of it and why the gardens may have been hidden all this time. And I want to set the scene by locating the significance of Sigiriya and Ranmasuyana on a global platform. I mean, at Sigiriya, Sri Lanka has, in fact, one of the oldest and best preserved gardens in the world. And Senake found it important to take Sigiriya up to that world stage. And others, such as Dambula and Mulkirigala, they embody a living legacy of garden design, and they boast distinctive historical shifts and continuities that are seldom paralleled elsewhere. And Senake proposes that the boulder and terrace typologies of gardens in Sri Lanka marks a particular Sri Lankan contribution to garden history worldwide. So those are the 3 main things you will get out of this book is setting Sri Lanka's garden on this world stage and saying what is it that makes them so special. Here you're looking at the palace of Cyrus the Great. This is about 600 BC. And one of the things that makes it special is this charbagh, the garden in 4 plots, and usually the water channels run here. And you will see this in Sigiriya, but you will see the inverse of it. The pools in Sigiriya are these whole squares are pools, and you walk, the pathway runs this way. But these are called charbagh from the Hindi. The Mughal gardens have the same thing. So that's about the earliest you can get to closest to Sigiriya. And let's see what the next one is. So if we put Sigiriya there, then I must tell you that this is a conjectural reconstruction. If you go to the site, you can't see anything like this. You have to imagine it in your mind and know something about these reconstructions. Whereas Sigiriya is also mostly roofless, but you have a much better preserved site. And to put it in a global context, we are looking here at a Mughal garden. A Mughal garden in the bottom here. I don't know what's happening, sorry folks. So on top is the gardens at Versailles. As you can see, they are from the 16th century, and over on the left, the Hadrian's Villa Adriana, and this is Mughal garden from about 1600. So you can see the level at which Sri Lanka is able to pitch her gardens and sit within this framework of global ideas. So these are the renowned 17th century gardens of the Sun King's Chateau at Versailles. That's the one on top. And the rest I've explained to you. So now we are going to look at royal gardens. And this is Sigiriya, as you can see. You can see the charbagh here. Oops. These four, these are the water gardens at Sigiriya. You enter from two, well, they're called moats, but I call them pools. Oops. I call them pools. And this is, all this is a water garden in Sigiriya. And then you go up here to the boulder gardens, and then the terrace gardens, and then you get led up to the gallery which is there. So Sigiriya has this amazing, this part of the site is excavated, and this part of the site is not, so that it can be done later when we are more technically advanced. But you can get a good idea of the charbagh, and here we are in the 5th century. And then on the top corner you can see the octagonal pool, the fabulous boulder, and the landscape of rocks that comes in at this level itself. So these are highly planned and highly designed sites that you're looking at. This is gridded. The central line northeast, southwest runs exactly at the center of the rock. So nothing is left to chance. If you take the grid, you can measure it this way and the other way. And the site on the east is also unexcavated. It's left for future specialists. So here from the water gardens, you will enter what Senake has called the boulder gardens. So you will see these boulders, and if you see here, you have terraces there as well. So the boulder gardens and the terrace, there are here 1, 2, 3 terraces that you're seeing. These are all man-made, and they were covered with plaster and painted. Most of the boulders were also covered with plaster. We can't say how far that went or whether they were completely painted. So Senake would tell me, you just imagine these boulders colored, plastered and colored, and all these are plastered and colored, and probably these had roofs, some not all, and on top of these would sit pavilions of perishable material which were also painted and colored. So you've got to give this whole thing time to turn into a 3D reconstruction. I'm sure the scholars will do that in the future, but for the moment you just have to listen to text or read it in the book. And here you're now in the terrace gardens, and what we mean by terrace is this. These are terraces, and they're all man-made. So if you go up the site along these terraces with the stone walls covered with plaster, and then up again and up again, and so you go on until you come to the mirror wall or the gallery. And this is Ran Masuyana. Our subject at the moment is Royal Gardens. So we are looking at, this is the site, and what's magical about this site is these 3 diguvil, these long linear pools run parallel to the Tissa River on the outside, and these pools you're looking at are along a boulder ridge that is here. And inside here you have like a Sitala room, and the water can come, when it's very hot, they can push it out through exits in that wall, and up here there have been another building, and you can sit inside here. They have lounges cut into the stone, and the water like a shower will come down, and then you can come out and sit here and eat and bathe and sing and whatever. And this is, most of us just walk here and go off, but if you are interested, you can walk right down these gardens. Today they are full of plants and you can't identify them, and there are some more pools here. and 3 pavilions set on a terrace there, and water there, and another big pool there. So, and this is a wall garden. This is Ranmasuyana, and these are world-class gardens in anybody's book. So I've spoken to you about the shapes of the water bodies, and we'll carry on. Now this is one of my favorites, is the Dipuyana, the island gardens of an island or island garden. And there are 1, 2, 3 of these pavilions. The main citadel is on that side. Oops. We're going back here. The palace and the other audience hall and so on are here. And here is what the British built the hotel. So these are the 3 gardens that, with the gardens around the royal residences, created the Dipuyana. And next. And here you can see one of the little pavilions, and sitting in water, and then I'm taking you to Kandy because you're only looking at royal gardens. That design tradition is continuing right down into Kandy, a man-made lake and an island. So if you can see Baba imagining Anuradhapura from all this, then I've succeeded tonight in getting my point across to you that ideas and matter are mixed in a way. And now I'd like to shift to monastic gardens. So I call this a garden because it has no roof. Here we have this enormous, this is Ruan Malisaya, what I call terrace 1 and terrace 2, and there's a wall outside. And the shapes on a 2D plan will be square, circular, and rectangular, and another circle and a cone. But if you move into 3D, then they change again. There are hemisphere and these walled rectangles. And usually this is stone paved, and this is a sand valley malua, and this is the Salapatla malua. And the wall goes right around here, and these are gardens for what I call state theatre performances, as well as religious, administrative, and military celebrations. These are not gardens just for individual worship, but that's beside the point. The double terraces are the first stone paved and the second sand filled, but whether that was the original, we can't say at the moment. That's what's happening now. And from here we move on to the Giri monasteries, which are Giri monasteries are mountains with small monastic units. But what is interesting about this stupa in the Giri monastery is that there are no plants, there's no flora, but it's walled, and usually it's sand. Nowadays all these are being covered with tiles. And this is the Bodhi tree garden. This also has usually no other flora, just the sand and the Bodhi tree, and I call this these ritual gardens. What they do is, these are very high up the mountain, so it's not easy to get to, but this external view is always part of this design, and the flora is always shared with the forest. So that's what makes these spaces so amazing. But we don't usually bring boulders or stones from outside. The design tradition is to build with the site, with the topography. So don't forget, they draw in these views from far, which is very common in the Japanese tradition and so on. So here we're looking at another ritual garden, but you have to note there are 1, 2, 3, 4 levels of terraces round the tree, and various people give it the oldest tree in the world and so on. I'm not so sure, because for various reasons we'll just skip that. And this is a garden in Kudumbigala, and behind this is the cave image house. So I call this a cave image house garden. And this is the statue in Dover, and it would have had a building outside it with a tile roof and maybe another 2, 3 tile roofs, and it would have been painted, plastered and painted, but today it stands exposed like this. And this is, the question to ask is, did they leave it there deliberately or not? Are these design decisions or nature's accidents? Now we move on to what I call the rock pool gardens. In almost every Giri monastery you can go to, from Situlpawa to Aluvihara to Bambaragala or anywhere, you will have these rock pools, and then the terrace that they build to hold that, and you can come up and do whatever you want to there. And this is Kaludia Popuna. So it's not, strictly speaking, it's not a Giri monastery because it's not very high up, but you have the terraces here, and buildings on top. And the monks were in the caves at much higher levels than this. And here, of course, is the lounge seat for, we don't know who uses gardens really, though it's come under rock pool gardens. It's not clear. So now we are looking at the next topic, colonial gardens. Now you're looking at maybe what you're really familiar with as you call gardens, British colonial ideas, concepts, both Haggala and Peradeniya. And that is Roehampton Estate. And what I think is really interesting about this is this art and craft style of house and garden. These are kind of Gertrude Jekyll's design, something of that range. And under this lies a terrible history of, you all know your own history, so I don't need to tell you. The plantation and the devastation it caused for people. Now into contemporary gardens. Oops. This is the Boulder Gardens Hotel in Kalwana. And the next one is Water Gardens, Sigiriya. And that is Sigiriya in the gardens. And that's it for tonight, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shanti. I'm very sorry to tell you that since it's an oration today, we are not having a question time, but Shanti will be here, and I'm sure many of you who have questions will be able to talk to her in the next segment, which is the fellowship and hospitality part of our event today. Shanti, thank you very much. You not only told us something about Seneka's vision and the new book, but I think you interested all of us to go back and look at these sites and see them in different eyes. So thank you very much. I had not noticed the concept of the Sharbagh, for instance, and obviously that is extremely key to understanding the Sri Lanka gardens. And I thank you very much for being here and for taking the trouble. I think, in fact, are these slides your own or from the book? Because they're really very beautiful slides.
On the gardens, it's from the book.
So Shanti says they're all from the book. And I I'm sorry we don't have a copy of the book to show you, but I'm sure you'll be able to access it online. So thank you very much, and please join us for fellowship outside. Thank you.